President Putin said Russia would never forget the North Koreans who lost their lives paying tribute to what he called their heroism.
Yang is sending up to 30,000 more troops to bolster Russian forces along the front lines. North Korea initially sent some 11,000 troops.
A war in Europe going on where North Koreans are helping the Russians to fight that war. And indeed, it is report that these numbers could increase.
You've seen armored convoys before, but never one this size hitting a trap this carefully built. This wasn't just a minefield scattered across farmland. This was 3 square kilometers, engineered layer by layer, seismic triggered charges, remote detonated corridors, and artillery locked onto preset coordinates. And when 55 tanks and 40 armored carriers rolled in, the battlefield seemed to come alive against them. Why didn't a single commander spot the setup? And what did the Ukrainians know that made their confidence absolute? That's exactly what we're uncovering in this breakdown. Before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Imagine farmland that looks completely ordinary by daylight, but every inch is wired to explode.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has thanked the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for providing troops to help Russia fight Ukraine.
How do you feel about North Korea's participation now going from a few thousand up to maybe 30,000?
3 square kilometers of soil, roads, and hedgerows were transformed over 2 weeks into a system built to trap armor where no armor should ever advance. The fields masked a kill zone, layered with enough explosives to cripple a regiment, hidden beneath a surface that looked like nothing more than quiet countryside. Engineers worked entirely at night, digging silently, packaging charges underground, and camouflaging disturbed earth so reconnaissance drones would find no sign of tampering. By the time it was ready, the ground itself had become a weapon. Into this countryside came the target: 55 tanks, 40 armored carriers, and nearly 700 soldiers stretched in a line 4 kilometers long. Their mission counted on mass and speed, rolling forward as one unified spearhead. What they didn't see was that the path ahead hadn't been chosen by them. It had been designed for them. Every meter of soil between the tree lines, every shallow curve of the roads, had been mapped out beforehand, waiting for their advance into the pocket.
Admitted for the first time it had deployed soldiers to the conflict. It said it helped, in its words, to liberate the Russian region of Kursk.
With sanctions circumvention with dual-use goods, and to your point, North Korea has provided already troops now fighting in Europe. Can you imagine?
The preparation was not one type of mine scattered at random. Engineers laid 120 TM-83 directional anti-tank charges, each positioned to blast molten copper at tank armor. Alongside them were TM-62 pressure mines packed just deep enough to detonate under the weight of an approaching vehicle. For precise kills, M200 electrically fired mines were tied to detonation cords, giving operators control over when to ignite. This layering meant no single type of vehicle could be safe. Heavy tanks risked blowing tracks, lighter carriers risked being torn apart instantly, and even retreat vehicles ran the risk of detonation behind the formation.
And it's like they're sending the North Korean troops into a wood chipper. They're all coming back in caskets, but it doesn't seem to matter.
To Russian territory last year, officials say thousands of those North Korean fighters were either killed or wounded.
Technology added another level of threat. Underground sensors, capable of detecting the tremors of tracked vehicles from 10 meters away, armed some mines automatically. Once movement was sensed, a concealed warhead fired without a single operator needing to press a button. Other explosives were wired for manual release, allowing crews monitoring the convoy to pick the exact second to destroy a bridge or rupture a line of vehicles. Charges were buried deep under village roads, ready to collapse escape corridors or trap columns in craters that would stop even the heaviest armor. At ground level, the geography appeared open and passable, yet safe corridors had been crafted intentionally. Narrow lanes looked like unmined paths, but they served only to guide lead tanks deeper toward the densest concentration of explosives. The trap was a chessboard where each square had been programmed long before the convoy arrived. Every choice of movement, left, right, forward, or retreat funneled armor into areas already bracketed by artillery fire coordinates. There was no single point of entry that wasn't already scripted. Drones circled above for weeks, recording thermal images and updating maps of enemy staging zones. Operators relayed hourly reports, noting the convoy's buildup and direction. These updates were folded into fire control networks so that once the final order came, artillery crews could hit previously plotted impact zones without needing to adjust. Engineers and gunners weren't working as separate units. They were strands of one net tightening minute by minute until the convoy entered the design made for it. What looked to the enemy like country farmland was, in reality, a living system that could sense, react, and strike before tank commanders even registered they were trapped. It wasn't just bombs in dirt, it was an organized network that turned open ground into a weapon shaped against steel. And it set the stage for what came after, because firepower alone doesn't win battles. Coordination does.
Western officials believe at least 1,000 North Korean soldiers have been killed in Ukraine.
Russia's getting yet more help from North Korea in its ongoing invasion of Ukraine.
By 7:58 a.m., the first North Korean T-90 tank rolled into the zone that had been waiting for it. There was no warning, no telltale sign of danger, just the sudden roar of the ground erupting beneath the lead vehicle. A buried charge, triggered by seismic sensors, launched into the bottom armor, sending smoke and debris shooting skyward. Almost at once, secondary charges linked by cords tripped, tearing through nearby BTRs. In seconds, steel and fire ripped the formation apart, and the long column stalled as vehicles slammed into one another, unsure whether the danger came from in front, behind, or right beneath their tracks. The convoy had been built on speed and momentum, but now both were gone. The leading tanks were crippled. The middle was jammed with armored carriers, unable to move forward. Retreat was cut off when charges buried under bridges behind them detonated, collapsing escape points into burning craters. Drivers shouted, crews abandoned tanks on fire. Commanders tried to regroup, but disorientation spread faster than orders could reach. The 4-kilometer-long column was locked into place, and confusion was the greatest weapon Ukraine had released so far. Less than 30 seconds later, artillery that had been pre-calibrated days in advance opened fire. Ukrainian guns didn't need observers in the moment. Their coordinates had already been fed into fire control systems when the mines were laid. Shells fell across the rear of the formation, closing the gap behind and slicing off the convoy from retreat. Explosions tore through vehicles, attempting to reverse out of the chaos. Any attempt to regroup further forward only drove crews deeper into the pocket, where more hidden charges and directed mines waited for movement. While artillery covered the kill zone, Ukrainian mechanized infantry moved in on the flanks. Concealed in drainage ditches, protected from the direct view of armor, squads advanced into positions alongside the stalled North Korean carriers. From such angles, automatic grenade launchers and shoulder-fired rockets hit targets at ranges too short for heavy guns to traverse effectively.
Pyongyang is sending up to 30,000 more troops to bolster Russian forces along the front lines. North Korea initially sent some 11,000 troops.
Carriers that survived blasts were engaged from the sides, where their protection was weakest. What began as a mechanical breakdown shifted into direct, small unit combat, with Ukrainian troops exploiting every blind spot. Overhead, Bayraktar TB-2 drones locked onto the rear elements of the convoy. In synchronized strikes, they destroyed supply vehicles and troop carriers that had not yet been hit, ensuring that the entire column sat paralyzed. At the same time, Oplot tanks moved into firing angles along both flanks. These heavy pieces weren't shooting at moving opponents. They were targeting immobilized armor. Each round that struck did so with methodical precision, picking apart tanks unable to reposition. The convoy, once massive and threatening, had lost the ability to maneuver, reduced to a static target. North Korean crews did try to respond. Suicide drones launched from carriers swarmed toward Ukrainian ground forces, but the response was as immediate as everything else. Low-flying Ukrainian air defenses, including Shilkas and heavy machine guns, cut into the drones. Firing walls of steel into the sky, these defenses shredded incoming drones before they could impact. Any hope of overwhelming Ukraine's position through swarm tactics was shut down in midair. For minutes, the battlefield was nothing but overlapping detonations and collapsing command. By 8:12 a.m., the offensive no longer existed as a fighting force. 42 vehicles were destroyed outright. 14 more stood abandoned where crews had fled. Over 200 troops were counted among the dead, wounded, or captured.
President Putin said Russia would never forget the North Koreans who lost their lives paying tribute to what he called their heroism.
The convoy had entered confident in numbers and armor, but what it found was planning, patience, and timing. Because in warfare like this, technology and firepower matter, but discipline and coordination decide who walks away. Superior planning and coordination turned overwhelming armor into a broken force in less than 2 hours. Ukrainian defenses didn't rely on sheer firepower. They relied on timing, waiting until every vehicle was inside the zone before activating mines, artillery, and drones. The result was a 4-kilometer column reduced to wreckage before it could adapt. This fight shows how patience and sensors may weigh more than numbers or armor in modern war. Steel alone cannot survive against a network built to counter it. Do you think high-tech ambushes like this will define tomorrow's wars? Share your thoughts below.